words of the expats. And I'm here in Sanford, Florida, amidst the torrential onslaught of Hurricane Idalia, aimlessly running around the parking lot of a logistics park for no apparent reason but to bring you the amazing story of an American who found themselves stranded in Fuzhou, China, amidst a torrid and tumultuous affair with the daughter of chief of police, which almost winded up with them rotting their lives away in a Chinese prison framed for murder. So won't you join me tonight on the wonderful world of the expats?
Just want to say thanks for having me on your show. I'm a big fan. I've seen just about every episode. I buy all your merch, man. I got like a $5,000 credit line dedicated just to kind of like sit before you did, you know. So I'm a big fan. And but there's kind of like one thing, you know, when it kind of comes to the embellished sauce, you're laying it on pretty heavy, you know. Really kind of laying on that con and the condiment. So I was just kind of wondering if, well. Yeah, but like, I'm trying to tell the truth here, right? So these are true China life stories. These are true China stories, okay? And this one's called Dead in the Water. And it goes back to my first year in China in Fuzhou, Jiangxi. It was kind of like a really eventful year. And I think some of that had to do with the fact that it's kind of a vetting process there. Like, you go through a pretty intense vetting process to go to China and work there, concerning getting your background check and getting your college diploma. You got to get all that notarized, and then you got to get it apostilled by departments of state. You know, and that can take months. It takes, you know, probably $1,000, $1,500 to get all that done. And that's a big, project to get all that done. That's pretty heavy. Sort of vetting process there, you know, something the United States doesn't particularly do very well, but they're pretty dedicated to doing that. And then I think once you get to the country, then you got to go through another vetting process, a localized one with their localized police, because I kind of felt like, you know, I was having a lot of like run-ins with the police in Fuzhou. And I kind of think that makes sense, right? You know, because there's a lot of people up to no good. You know, there's a lot of people going over in China, and I mean, I know I've met people who are breaking the law over there, and you got a lot of people, you know, up to no good, basically. So anyway, so this kind of concerns another run-in, and most of the events kind of take place after my last story with the lost little girl. I kind of almost ended up adopting a little girl in my first 6 months in China, and this kind of takes place after that mostly. But there's kind of some events that I'm gonna like talk about that happened before that kind of I think have some bearing on this story. But the parts that take place after after I almost ended up adopting a little girl. I started to think like, you know, it dawned on me that I hadn't had a lot of experience taking care of anything at that point, right? I was in my 40s, and I hadn't had any pets since I was a kid or anything like that, you know. So I was thinking, all right, you're gonna have to brush up on them skills, right? You're gonna have to get familiar again with having something in your space, you know, all the time, and looking after it and taking care of it. So I was thinking, all right, I'll look for opportunities to do that. And so in that first year, I had a pet dog, I had a pet cat, and I had a pet egret. And this is kind of where the story kind of starts to take place. It starts to gel, starts to materialize again. At this campus, I was housed in the hotel on the campus. The campus had its own hotel, and I was housed in the bottom floor in a suite that kind of looked out on the front lawn, and, you know, extended the entire length of the hotel and to the back. But, you know, you always had to go in through the lobby. I would always have to go in the lobby, check in, and go to my apartment, you know, every day, going, leaving the building and entering the building. And sometimes I figured, because I was on that bottom floor, I realized I could just, if I wanted to go into town, I didn't want to go through the whole process of going in the hotel and checking in and going to my apartment. I would just take my book bag and throw it over on my patio, because my patio was right there. There's just kind of a brick wall separating the patio from the front of the building. So I just walk up there, throw my books over, and then head into town and just kind of skip all that and get my books later when I was in the apartment. So it kind of concerns that time, but also the hotel was it was almost a part of the city park, and the city parks in China are these kind of big, amazing spaces where there's tons of things you can do. They attempt to have like a mini Six Flags for the kids with rides and stuff. They'll have zoos, they'll have aquariums, temples, they'll have pagodas, pavilions, walkways, lakes, paddle boats, all kinds of stuff, bridges over them. And I really like the city parks. They're big sort of hubs for people that congregate in China too, and you can see them doing all kinds of things, dancing and yoga or Tai Chi and stuff like that. And it's great to go to the parks. It's one of the things that I kind of always enjoyed. You'll see a lot of, if you go to my Dollar Store Dynasty videos, you'll see me in the parks a lot of the time doing my videos there. And this is my first experience of this park, so it was completely fascinating to me. And our hotel was right on the border, it butted up right against it, right? So if you went outside kind of to the right, there was the lake, right? And it kind of had the shore, and was an area for kind of sitting and stuff like that. It was all, there's a path around the lake. And then immediately right behind it, if you went out the back door, there was a little parking area, and then there was a cement wall, and immediately on the other side of that cement wall was the zoo, and directly on the other side was the lion cage and the tiger cage. So at night I could hear this lion all night go I could hear this thing moaning all night, and it was in pretty rough shape. It was a sketchy zoo. You'll see, I'll put a link up here. There was a dog in it, right? And that dog is from that zoo. And these lion and this tiger were in really rough shape. I kind of felt sad for them. They had their teeth all ground down, and their hair was all matted. And I ended up actually doing a lesson about that lion too, because I decided to do a lesson on emergency language. I was thinking what kind of language is useful to Chinese people, and I said, well, emergency language is pretty important. So I did a whole story or story based around that lion escaping the zoo. That was pretty fun, and so it was really cool that we had that zoo there, even though it was pretty sketchy. And also, like I said, it was on the side of that lake, and on that lake, if you just a little bit far out in the middle of that lake, there was this little island that people didn't really have access to. But during the summer, I forget exactly when, these egrets, these white egrets, would migrate there, right? Egrets are kind of a white seabird. You'll see them a lot in Florida. And they almost look like a little stork for the most part. And they'd all migrate there. So you'd see all these birds just kind of swarming in. It was like an airport terminal. They'd be coming in and going out and squawking and making all this cacophony of sound. And it was pretty fascinating to watch that. They just swarmed that little island. It was pretty amazing. Just lots and tons of these birds. And some of them would nest in the trees around the campus too. There was not enough space on this island, and they would nest in these trees above the hotel, and that kind of encompassed there's a road going through the campus. There's trees along that, and they'd all sort of nest up there. And what was happening was that the chicks would get either pushed out or they'd fall out, but they'd fall out onto the ground, and typically they'd be falling into the road, and that road just became this gruesome sort of highway of death, right? It was just covered, and I mean there was a lot of dead chicks in that road with the bird poop, and it was gruesome because the cars would just drive right over them, right? They didn't stop and not swerving, and really they had no means of doing that. There were so many. And so when you're walking down this road, you just see these squirming sort of some half live, some flattened like baby chicks. You know, they almost look like fetuses. Real nightmare. And just kind of squirming, and some, you know, and they were like so, some of them were so, they couldn't like make noises, just kind of moving their mouths and stuff, you know. And so I'd have to put some of them out of their misery sometimes. And it was just gruesome, you know. It was just kind of disturbing to see that every day. And you know, but you know, you just kind of like, you know, suck it up, buttercup. And this one day I decided to, you know, I was going to go into town, so I decided to walk across the lawn and throw my books over the patio instead of going through the lobby. And I see one of those egrets in the grass, and it's pretty well developed, right? It had some of its plumage, but it couldn't fly or anything. And I decided, okay, why don't you try and raise it, like try and save it, try to rescue this bird. Maybe you can get it to the point where it can fly again. And so I scooped him up, brought him into the apartment, kind of hid him, brought him into my apartment, got a box, put him in the box, then I went out and I guess I got some hay from probably around the hotel somewhere, one of the beds or something, and I got a cup of water, and then I was like, I gotta feed this bird. If he's gonna survive, I'm gonna have to feed him somehow. And I was like, it's kind of before this is the first time I had actually a laptop and a smartphone like in my life. It was like 2009, and I was kind of late to that game. So I wasn't really like a big Google guy at that point. Most of it I just kind of went on observation, experience, and knowledge, you know, book smarts. And so I was like, all right, they probably eat fish from the water, from the lake, and the parents probably regurgitate this fish, and that's how they eat. So I'm like, all right, let me go get some minnows or something. So heading into town, I know where like the pet stores is in China. You're familiar, like most of the cities, for convenience, they're kind of pre-mall, mall consumerism, you know. So like what happens is like all the similar stores will sort of locate themselves on the same streets, like so there'll be a whole street or section of the city dedicated to like pet stores, or like all just hairdressers, or all just tailors, or all just, you know, home improvement. Makes it pretty easy to find stuff, but yeah, you just kind of wonder how they compete with each other. You know, you end up buying from the first one you find what you need, and for the most part. So I went to the pet store, right? And I liked that street. When I first found it was really fascinating. There's a lot of interesting things to see there. Pretty sketchy, also very unhygienic, but still pretty fascinating to go down those streets and go in the stores and see the different kinds of animals they had, and how and you're pretty, you know, you have the ability to really, you have like full access to a lot of these animals for the most part. Went down there and found a place that had minnows, bought a big bag of minnows. I said, all right, cool, head back to the apartment, and then I started to feed my bird. Now I called the bird Newton. I called him there because he fell out of a tree, and I thought that was a good name for him. So I would get the minnows, I'd chop them all up, and I had tweezers, and I'd pick up Newton, and I'd, you know, feed him, you know, I just kind of rubbed the fish against his beak, still open his beak, and I'd stick in the fish, and he'd swallow it, and it was all going pretty well, I thought. He started to eat, he was sleeping, I had him in his box, and I'd put that box next to my bed every morning, kind of look over, check in on him. And pretty much every time I was in the apartment, if I was working at the desk or something like that, I'd take him out, I'd put him up on the desk, and he would stand there. He'd do what, like, basically a stork does, you know, he'd just stand there and lift a leg once in a while, maybe take a few steps, but there was not much activity out of Newton for the most part. And just be like, what's up, Newton? How you doing? You know? And but this one day, like maybe about 3 weeks into raising the bird or looking after it, he did kind of something strange, right? I had him up on the desk, and I was just kind of working, probably on songs or something like that. If you see, there's a video I did of my first kind of music video, an arrangement of Bruce Springsteen's Factory. That's from that time. That's from that location. That's from Fuzhou. That summer, I think, and so I was doing something at the desk, and Newton, he walked kind of around, and the desk was put up against the windowsill, and the window was facing out the front of the building. And he went over there, he walked all the way over there, he jumped up on the windowsill, and he started looking out that window. He was looking out that window, and he just kind of had like a lonesome kind of look on his face, a lonesome kind of expression. He just stood up there looking out the rest of the night, and I was like, "What's up, dude? What's going on?" You know, it's the most you've done in the entire time that I've had you here. So I couldn't figure it. You know, that's what he did, and I got tired. I said, "I'm going to bed." I picked him up, put him in his box, and went to bed. And in the morning, I get up and I look over my bed, and I see him. He's lying down on his side. His eyes are closed. And I go down and I push him, and he's stiff, right? So he's passed away in the evening, and really don't know why. I was pretty sad, you know, because I thought I'd be able to raise it to, you know, into its maturity, at least, and be able to fly. So I decided, you know, all right, so I'm gonna bury him. You know, I'm gonna be a little discreet about this. I know, you know, it's a little risky to go out to bury him out in the park, you know, like you could just throw him I didn't want to just throw him in the trash, right? I said, I'm going to try and bury him, you know. So I decided to go in the park and bury him. And, you know, you kind of got to be careful about that, like, because at any point people are going to be suspicious of you. And there's plenty of people that kind of don't want to see you, that are suspicious of you to begin with, right, as a foreigner. And so you kind of want to be discreet about it, I thought, you know. So I went out there early in the morning. I kind of looked around when there's nobody around. I found a cluster of trees with a lot of, you know, flora and fauna in it. And went in there and dug a little hole, put Newton in, and buried him. Good, you know. Nobody really saw me. No problems. Head back to campus. Head back to my apartment. And then I'm like, all right, now I got all these minnows. I got to get rid of those, and I'll just go dump them in the lake. You know, I'm not going to flush them down the toilet. They're alive. You know, why waste them? But then it occurs to me, like, like you might be introducing invasive species. You know, if anybody sees you doing that, that's maybe a bigger problem for you. You know, because that could be seen as sabotage to their ecosystem or something like that. You know, and I know in America that's a pretty, you know, with the EPA, it's Environmental Protection Agency. That's a big issue. You know, you can get in serious trouble for introducing invasive species, and there's been ecosystems that have been pretty destabilized, if not destroyed, by invasive species, because they tend to become very aggressive once they're in a new environment, and really that ecosystem doesn't know how to adjust to it yet, or how to sort of defend itself against that. So there's a lot of laws and licenses, and you know, typically it's you know, not intentional, but sometimes it probably is. So anyway, I'm like, I better not do that. Better not go to the lake. Anybody sees that, they're gonna be all over you if you dump these minnows in there. I'm like, these are just minnows. I'm sure they came from the lake. I'm sure they're not an invasive species. You know, like this is what these birds, the tortoises, the turtles, the birds, the fish, everything eats these things. Not going to be a problem, but like just to play it safe, I'm going to better be discreet about that too. So I'm like, well, I got a lot of time on my hands. I'm going to bike out to the river. And the Ruho River kind of runs through Fuzhou, and it runs out to the countryside. So I'm like, I know I can park out there. That's a bigger ecosystem. These minnows are not going to have a big impact one way or the other. But I'm also like, well, if they spawn, that's another food source, you know. And I'm sure, like I said, I know fish, turtles, all these things eat these things. Bike out to the river, and I get out to a spot where the river is, you know, like it's an elevated road along the. There's an elevated road along the river, and there's these kind of like cement buttresses. It's you know, and you go to like a stairway. There's like maybe like a little concrete stairway that goes down to the shore, and then from the shore to the river, there's probably like 80 yards. Right? It's pretty big stretch from the wall to the river, and that's because the flooding can get quite severe there, right? So, and it was kind of a dry season. It was the middle of the summer, and there wasn't a lot of flooding going on. What was there? Actually, a lot of the flooding actually happens in the summer. I know it was kind of pretty wet at times. But anyway, I go down there and I'm going to dump them in the river. But I'm like, okay, there's like cottages around here. I can still see residences here, and there's a couple across the river. So let me just kind of walk up this river. You know, it's kind of interesting. You can see dead fish and stuff along the riverside. And I'll just walk up the river, and I'll find a spot where there's nobody on the other side, nobody on this side, and I'll dump these minnows in the river and be done with it, right? I walk up the river, I walk up, then there's this bend, and I'm like, all right, let's go around that bend. I go around the bend, I see there's nothing on the other side, there's nothing on my side, and when I look down, that bend is kind of blocking any view from anybody looking upriver, so I'm like, here we go, you know, I found the spot, you know, let them free, set them free, you know. So I take my minnows down to the riverside, I dump them in the river, and I'm like, mission accomplished, good, you know, I'm safe, these things I'm taking care of everything there. I can head back and start all over again. Heading back down the river. I go around the bend, and the first thing I see, like way down by where that stairwell is, where my bike is at, I locked my bike up down there. See, there's like a little grouping of people, maybe 5 or 6 people down by the riverside, and I'm like, gee, I think, you know, like, where did they come? When did they came up right after me? Maybe they were kind of like, I'm a little bit suspicious of it, right? I'm like, maybe they followed me. You know, they saw this foreigner going down there. And I'm curious. Maybe they're just fishing though, right? Maybe they're just down there fishing. So let's keep walking. Just keep heading toward them. And now I can start to see a little more. I can make out a little more what they. I can make a little more. You know, I can see them a little bit better now. I'm a little bit closer, and I can see they're wearing police uniforms. So now I'm like, oh my God, I'm busted. You know, like somebody ratted me out or something or whatever. They're trying to get these minnows. They're trying to get these minnows or something. They saw me dump something in the river, you know, and they're here definitely for me. I better just kind of go face the music and keep walking. So I keep walking towards them. And now I can see them, that they're doing something at the riverside. They're pulling something out. There's this rope going in the river, and they're pulling it and they're bringing it towards shore. I can't see really what it is at this point. So I keep walking, get a little bit closer. Now, like, there's a big space between, you know, them and where the stairwell is. So I'm kind of like between it, kind of like halfway to the shore and halfway to the stairwell. And I'm close enough now that I can see pretty clearly what they're pulling out of that river. And I see that it's a corpse. They're pulling the corpse of a young man, probably around in his 30s, late 20s. And I can see the body is completely naked, and I can see the skin is very sort of alabaster, really kind of bleached out. And I can see the arms just are very stiff. They're just the only kind of movement in this body. So you've seen there's rigor mortis is set in. And they're pulling them up on shore. They pull them up on shore, and then they kind of flip them over, and they're looking at them and checking them out. And I'm like, wow, he must have drowned or something. That's probably why he's naked. You know, a lot of the Chinese people don't know how to swim, or they typically, especially the country folks, they will swim naked, right? Or maybe fell off of fishing. I probably wasn't fishing. Yeah, it's probably out swimming and he drowned, right? So I'm like, wow, that's a pretty shocking thing to see. You know? That's kind of like one of the things I liked about one of the reasons I went to the countryside was because I grew up in a countryside, and I always understood that there's a certain brutal honesty about the countryside, about nature, right? And I think that instructs people better than that. You'll find a more accurate picture of a culture in the countryside than you will in cities, right? Because people are accustomed to that brutality of life. They're more accustomed to like sort of these brutal things, and I kind of grew up in the midst of that. So I was like, I want to go to the country. I don't want to go to the cities because that's just another. You're just going to find a very similar consumer sort of mentality there. And I don't feel that's representative really of the people. So I'm like, I'm going to go to the countryside because of that brutality. And here I'm seeing, they're pulling dead guys out of the river. And so I'm like, this guy probably drowned, and they're pulling him out. I know this happens a lot down here, to be honest with you. But as I'm walking by, and it never occurs to me that, never occurs to me that I might get sort of get framed. It never occurred to me. But I'm walking by, and these police are not even paying attention to me, and I thought that was kind of weird. Like, they're not even noticing me, and I'm not thinking of anything of my guilt or anything like that. I'm just walking by. I'm like, wow, that's pretty shocking thing to see. And then they're just kind of looking at this body, and they're talking. And then like I just get along the right side of them, just about to head up to the stairwell, and this one police officer, I very distinctly look. He shoots me a look. He's got me. He looks at me, and I'm like, that's it. Like, now I am a suspect in the death of this young man. Now I'm a suspect in this. Like, now it's very feasible that through the worst horror stories of China is that somebody will frame you for this, right? Like, somebody will say the foreigner was there, and there's a dead guy, and he had something to do with it, and put him in jail, for whatever reason, or kick him out. They wouldn't kick you out of the country. Like, if they wanted to, you're like thinking like of all this political leverage. Now you might end up in a Chinese prison now, for the murder of this guy or something. Like, you're just walking along the shore, and I'm like, oh no, But I'm like, once again, like, you got to go on good faith here, Like, you got to go on good faith here. You just kind of like say that, you had nothing to do with this. So like, just head back to get to the bike, unlock my bike, and I bike back to the campus. But I'm like, I'm sitting there kind of dwelling on it, and I'm like, oh my God, like I could get a knock on the door any second now. Please, somebody could say I had something to do with this. And it doesn't even have to be like, there's such a bias against foreigners when it comes to kind of like, for Chinese people, like, if they want to pay out, you're going to end up paying out. And I'm like, anything like that could happen now, right? Somebody could just be like, yeah, I want to pay out, So this guy had something to do with it, and they could have a friend in the police station, Guanxi, and all of that. And I'm like, this could get really bad, just because you were there. And I'm happy to explain that I was there just dumping the minnows. I don't think that's anything to rat your, I don't think they're going to put me in jail for that. But somebody could frame you for having something to do with the death of that young man. So I'm just kind of like on edge now, I'm like, geez, the police could come and take me away any minute now. And so for about 2 months I'm waiting, and actually nothing happens, right? It's kind of anticlimactic. Nothing happens, and I'm clear to go. I'm like, phew, good faith wins the day. And but it was just kind of one of those weird experiences, interactions I was having with police in Fuzhou. And that's the story, right? That's the story of the dead man in the river, right? I was in China. This is after, so like now I've almost adopted a young girl, and now now I'm almost framed for murder in China. Now a little bit about the daughter of the chief of police. Now this kind of bookends this event. And like I said, there's all these events where I'm sort of like interacting with the police agencies. And here's why I kind of feel it was like I was being probed. Because early on in my stay, I think it was around like Qimingji, tomb sweeping day, a young lady, probably in her around 25 years old, we ran into each other, or we met each other. I think it was on campus. She wasn't a student of mine or anything, but she asked if I wanted to kind of spend Qimingji with her, go on a date, basically. And I said, yeah, of course. I'm looking to have a relationship. I'm looking to meet people. I'm looking to experience new things in China. That sounds exciting and fun to me. So definitely, I'd love to go on a date with you. And she's an attractive young lady. She knows English pretty well. And we decide that we're going to meet at the bus stop, and we're going to go out to the mountain on the holiday. The mountain is Lingufeng. I'll put a link up here. There's another video from Lingufeng. I went up there after this date. I went there alone, and when it wasn't so busy, and I shot a video there climbing the mountain. You can see that. That's one of the videos on my channel. So we decide to go there on the holiday. We decide we're going to meet at the bus station, then we'll maybe go out for dinner afterwards. I go to the bus station, and then I see her, and I'm like, what the heck? Because she's dressed in like this very, very pretty dress. She's in high heels. she's way overdressed for hiking in the woods. I'm dressed down. I'm in like casual kind of sportswear because I'm like, we're going hiking, right? We're going up a mountain. It's kind of hot out, and that's kind of that's sensible, appropriate, sportswear for the occasion. It's appropriate. It's appropriate clothing for the occasion. And she's in this very sort of almost like an elegant dress. And I'm like, what, and I'm like trying not to be insulting. So I'm not pointing it out. I'm not trying to say anything about it, right? I'm trying to be very polite about it, but I'm like, that's crazy. Like, what is she thinking? Like, even if it's like trying to impress me, that's way too much, right? And I'm like, oh, well, you look very pretty today. You look very pretty, but I'm like, it's so wrong. And I'm taken aback that I'm like, it's really awkward. I'm really uncomfortable with it. I'm like, well, she's not a very sensible person. She's going to put on airs, and I'm not crazy about women who put on airs, So we go out to the mountain, and we climb the mountain, and it's really busy. It's the holiday. This is a popular destination for families, Chinese families around that time. There are actually tombs in those mountains. And there's a lot of people out there, but we climb the mountain, and it's kind of a cool mountain. You'll see it in the video. There's like little stations, prayer stations, and up on the top there's a big temple, and you can eat there. And it's pretty cool. It's a pretty fun excursion, right? It was pretty fun climbing that mountain. We were chatting on the way up, but all the time I'm seeing she's kind of sweating, and she's stumbling a little bit in her shoes, and I'm kind of, and I have to like reach, I have to like hold her up sometimes because she almost falls over, and I'm kind of like and then it kind of hits me like, maybe that's like thing that Chinese girls do, they like to play the like they can fall in your arms kind of thing, with guys that they're interested in, they play the, and you help them, and they're like, I don't know, it's kind of like, maybe that's a little bit of flirty kind of behavior from this girl. That's why there were the heels. Because I've seen it, like, later on in China, I would see other women doing the same thing, like wearing high heels, dressed very fancy, hiking in the mountains. I was like, you're putting on airs, Anyway, we do that, and it's friendly talk, but I'm still like, she's putting on airs, and that's kind of a turnoff for me, to be honest with you. And we get down to the bottom of the mountain, and we're ready to go back into town, and the bus comes. Now, because it's so far out of town, the bus only comes like once every hour. So this bus comes, and there's just a mob of people at the bottom of the mountain. It's a really busy day. And that bus comes, and they just all swarm to this bus, really, and it's just aggressive, and they're pushing, and we try to get in there, and we're all like, kind of like, squashed in with all these people, and they're pushing, and there's like grannies like taking their kids, and they're using like battering rams. It was really kind of frightening how they were just like pushing this child in front of them and trying to get him on the bus. And I was like, this is a bad situation. Let's step back. I forget her name. I still have her in my QQ, probably from that iPhone 4 way back when. Back then there was no WeChat too. It was just QQ, but she's probably still in my QQ. So anyway, I'm like, let's get out of this. This is dangerous. I don't want to get trampled or anything like that. Like, this could go really bad. So let's get out of this. Let's step back. So me and her, we get out of the crowd, and I'm like, let's just wait until it's safe and we can get on that bus civilly, and then we'll go in town. We'll go head back into town. And she's like, yeah. She agrees with me. And around at the bottom, there's all there is these like sort of like cement cottages, kind of ramshackle cottages, cement cottages. They don't really have window panes, They look like poor homes, but they're selling snacks and stuff out front for the people. So they got like little tables, water, drinks, and snacks. And I remember very clearly like an ice cream box. They're selling ice cream. And out in front of these, these kind of homes, there's a bunch of kids playing. They're playing in the dirt. They're dirty, but they're healthy looking. They're happy. They're laughing. I'm like, oh, that's, it's quaint, But then this girl I'm with, she goes over to these kids. She walks over them, and she crouches down, and she's like touching their faces, and she's like, oh, they're so cute, so poor and stuff. And I'm like, what are you doing? You know? Like, what is this Mother Teresa show you're putting on here? Like, talking about putting on airs. I'm like, what is this? You know, what do you expect me to open my wallet for them or something? I'm not doing that. You know, like, they're perfectly happy, they're healthy, they're having a good time. Leave them alone. You know, it's kind of more creepy to be over here touching these children that you don't know. You know, and I don't say, I'm just like, yeah, but I don't really want to participate in whatever you're doing right now. It's like, I'm not gonna like take part of that, you know. I love kids too, but what you're doing right here is creepy to me, you know. It's doing the Mother Teresa kind of Sally Struthers thing, you know. I'm like, you know, so well, if you want to talk about like having kids, that's a different story. But like the idea of like sort of sponsoring children is not one I'm really sort of keen on right now. So finally, like I think it's about maybe 2 hours passed before we can kind of get on that bus safely, and we head back in town. We have dinner. It's kind of my first time that like I kind of had a private dinner with someone in China, and we got one of those fishes, like fish. A whole fish in China is very kind of popular. I think any banquet you go to, at some point they'll bring out a whole fish, you know. And so we do that. We go to get a fish. We go to the tank and we pick out a fish, and they bring it over to our table. And I remember very clearly it's still alive, and they scored it with a knife. They kind of did a cross pattern on its one side, then they flipped it over and did a cross. And the pain. This poor fish is in terrible pain, and they dump it in the boiling water. We just kind of sit there and we pick away at the fish for dinner, and we chat. That wasn't so bad, you know, but it's just the fish always tastes like dirt to me. It was always just like, they always tasted like dirt. So I was never a big fan of the fish. And so we have a conversation, but I don't really feel any spark or anything. I don't really feel I'm compatible, especially the whole kind of putting on airs was a real kind of, I'm like, I don't know. So we go back to the bus station, and you know, we decide to go back home, and that's kind of the end of it. I don't want to feel there's a love connection there, so I don't really contact her again, but I don't block her out. I'm not that kind of rude person. Like, if I'm not interested in a person, I don't try to be rude about it, you know. I try and you know, I'm not. And who knows, like, I'm open to the idea of continuing to talk after that time, be friendship. If she ever confronted me, if the conversation ever came up that, like, you know, do you want a relationship or you want to go on, then I would, you know, politely tell them that I'm not interested or I don't feel we're compatible. I'll give the reasons then. But, you know, they don't ask. I don't, you know, I have nothing to explain, but I'm not going to be rude to them and just be like, I don't want to tell you, you're lying, you know, screw you, you know. You know, I don't need to be rude about it. So that's the kind of the tumultuous toward romance, right? That's what. Now what the one thing that did come out during our date was that she told me she was the daughter of the chief of the police, right? So when she told me that, I was like, maybe they're probing me, you know, like maybe this is like a setup, you know, like they want to see if I'm a rapist, or they want to see if I'm like, you know, a pervert or something like that. And that's, so they, you know, they sent out a girl, they sent out somebody to sort of probe that. And so that's in the back of my mind too. And so I'm like, it's probably a good contact. If she's the daughter of the chief of police, probably a good contact to keep also, you know. So, like I said, we go back and I leave it at that, and time goes by. Now, after the little girl and after the dead guy in the river, there comes a time when I'm biking outside. I'm biking out in the country on the other side of the river, because there's this big, brand new, open 6-lane highway that they've just constructed out there, and there's nobody on it, right? It goes through these little villages, and then there's this path, this bamboo forest that had a little path up the trail. And I like to go out there and do that path because there's nobody around anywhere, right? Very quiet, nice place to kind of clear your head. And on this bike ride, it was just, to me, it was very safe because there's nobody out there. There's no traffic whatsoever. The only thing that you would see is these big kind of truck trows, or trow trucks, what I call them. They're bigger than dump trucks, so I call them trow trucks. And they'd just come blasting down that highway because there's nobody out there, and they'd drive right down the middle of it, like they didn't care anything about lanes. And And they'd be going so fast, all this stuff would just be falling out of their trucks all the time. Rocks and bricks and branches and stuff. And they'd just go flying by, and I knew to kind of stay way over the side, and give them a lot of room. And this one time I'm out there, and I guess one of those trucks must have dropped this big branch into the road, right? And it's a big branch. It's got a big kind of trunk to it. And I'm like, if anybody hits that, they're gonna, there's gonna be a bad accident, especially at night. You can't quite see that stuff. And one of the things I like to do are random acts of kindness. I grew up in a time when, I kind of always had that belief system. I learned that belief system very young, and I always subscribed to it. True charity or true acts of kindness are not the ones you're there specifically to take credit for. A lot of times these days, you definitely see people trying to take credit for it, get their picture, and let everybody know they're doing great things in the world. But I like those acts that people don't know that you've helped them, and you're not really expecting anything from it. One of the big ones I used to do when I was young, when I was old enough to do it, was back in the 70s, was turning lights off, right? People would leave their headlights on in parking lots all the time. And so when they came back out of the store or whatever they were at, their battery would be dead, and that's a major crisis. Now you got to deal with your car, and whatever plans you had are kind of off the table until you deal with your crisis. So it was always kind of a custom. I probably saw one of my parents do it one time or something, but you go up, you check the door, if it's open, you just go in and you turn their lights off. You just save them a world of pain, you save that person a world of pain and inconvenience, so it's that's a good idea. And so I don't know how many times people have done it for me. Maybe I'm sure people have done it for me before, and I'm so I'm repaying that favor, But then the technology took that away. Technology took that away, and it made it incriminating, right? Suddenly cars had automatic lights, and they had alarm systems. So if you dared to go and saw somebody with their lights on, it was you didn't know if that car had that mechanism yet where they turn off automatically or not. So it looked like you were trying to break in their vehicle or something. So it's you can't do that anymore. It's incriminating. So that's when I kind of switched over to taking things out of the road. I'd see a 2x4. If I saw something in the road that would cause a tire pop or something like that, I would even stop my car and get out and remove it from the road, thinking there's my act of kindness. There's my random act of kindness. I might be saving somebody else, and God knows who's doing it for me. And definitely driving the truck today, and the amount of tires that you see in the road, tire shreds, shredded up tires, or tire these big tire shreds. It's if you just think about it, how much money does it cost to clear this road? And all this garbage. There's got to be a massive bill attached to this task of getting all these tire shreds out of the road, and it's just so pervasive. There's just so much tire junk in your road. But anyway, just getting that stuff out of the road is you'd probably save a lot of accidents and a lot of people's vehicles from that. I'm sure they're a cause of quite a bit of damage at the very least, vehicles. So I'm thinking I'm going to get that branch out of the road. I'm going to do my good act of kindness here in China. And so it's in the middle of the road, and I'm way over on the side of the road, and I'm all right, so I'll just kind of start to head out to the middle of the road. And there's nobody out there. I'm just kind of taking it easy and going slow up to this branch. And out of nowhere, this gas-powered e-bike, and the gas-powered ones can go really fast. They can go probably get up to 55 miles an hour. Comes flying out of nowhere down the road. And he's got all this space on this. Here's the branch, here's me. He's got all this space over here. He's got 2 open lanes of space that he can pass me on. And on the other side of the branch, he's got 3 lanes. So he's got a huge space that he can pass over there. And he can pass me on my left, he can pass me on the right, and there would be no chance whatsoever of ever hitting me. But this guy, he decides that he's going to play Top Gun, right? He's going to be Maverick all of a sudden. And he's going to fly in between me and that branch. Even there's about 10 feet, and that space is decreasing because I'm on a trajectory towards this branch. That narrow sort of space between me and that branch is just decreasing and getting smaller and smaller. He thinks he's he thinks he's Maverick, man. He thinks he's Top Gun, and he's gonna fly in between me and that branch, and get through there. And he comes in and he clips me hard, right? He clips me from behind. I go over, I fall on my side with the bike. Luckily, I'm wearing my big leather pea coat, at that time, so I'm pretty well padded, and I don't get hurt whatsoever. But my bike is messed up. I can see that my back tire is totally wrecked. It's bent like in half. So this bike is no longer. I can't use my bike anymore. There's no way I'm biking back to my apartment. It's out of commission, and it's totaled. And then I see him, right? I see him on his e-bike, and he's doing this, and suddenly he's woo, and he jackknifes, right? He jackknifes, and he goes flipping over, and his bike goes flipping. Now he's got a guy on the back of his e-bike too, and that guy goes flipping over and rolling over to the side, and the e-bike just kind of spinning down. They got the worst of it, and I'm like, serves you right, dummy. Right? Serves you right, you bonehead, bozo. And so I get up and I go over to check on them. The passenger, he seems to be okay. He's getting up. He's walking over, welcome to the driver, and the driver's starting to get up. I'm like, what an idiot! What a complete jerk! I'm a little bit angry, and I get over to him, and he's looking up at me, and he starts looking, and he sees that I'm a foreigner, right? They don't speak English. He sees that they're kind of like young guys in their 20s or something. Like, no, he was like even older than that. He was like late 30s, I would say. He was kind of an older guy. I can see immediately they're stinking drunk, right? They're stinking drunk. I can smell it on them. I'm like, what a bunch of dope heads, what a bunch of idiots, And he's looking up and he sees that I'm a foreigner, and suddenly he goes into this act. He lays down. He's like, oh. I'm like, what a absolute, man, this guy's the worst. And I'm like, but I gotta get the police out here because these guys are a bunch of fruitcakes, And I'm like, I can't call the police. I can't call an ambulance. I don't know how to talk. I don't know. My Chinese isn't proficient enough. So I'm like, let me call the daughter of the chief of police. Right? I have her in my QQ, and that's who I call. I call her and I tell her my situation. I'm like, I had an accident out here. I really kind of need somebody to come out here. It looks like this guy is trying to frame me for it too. And so she says, we'll be out there. I'm like, I can't bike back. My bike's totaled. He clipped me from behind. And she says, all right, so we'll come out there. So she comes out there with her father and another police chief, and like her father doesn't know English, and the other police officer doesn't know English, but so she's kind of interpreting everything for me. And they go over and they talk to the guy, and they talk to me, and it's pretty clear to them that, like, this guy, because of the damages of my bike, and that they're drunk, and it's pretty clear that, they hit me, and he's trying to frame me, right? So they're like, well, you're fine, don't worry about it. And they give me a ride. The girl and her father, the chief of police, they drive me back to my apartment, and I say thank you. It was kind of awkward talking to her again after this long silence. I was kind of like, I need your help, And but it was very kind of I was very grateful for the help there, and it could have been another bad situation where somebody was just trying to looking for a big payout or worse, And so they drive me back, they drop me off, and then I don't hear anything for about 2 weeks, and then I get a call to come down to a police station out there in town. So I get on the bus, figure out where it is, get on the bus, go out there, and one of the first things I remember going to this police station is that, like, Chinese, like, their way of their deterrent for enforcing traffic laws is like these really gruesome pictures of accidents, these really like graphic pictures of accidents. Like you'll see them in parks. There's a video I did in Hongmei Park talking a little bit about Li Xing, where you'll see these, like, I walk by these, there's a shot of these placards, these pictures of really graphic, horrible people with their heads flattened in the streets from, like, e-bike accidents or traffic accidents. And I remember going to the police station this one time and seeing, like, these just really graphic sort of violent real photos from accidents of people just mangled. And I was like, wow, that's pretty brutal, pretty gruesome also. But I get there, and the guy comes out, the driver of the bike. He's out there, and he's with his wife, right? And they made him buy me a new bike. And so he's there, and he's apologizing to me. And I just remember his wife was being so bitchy to him. Like, she was just cursing him out, just slapping him up the side of the head. Like, you're an idiot, like, how can you, like, you're terrible. And I just couldn't help but laugh, man. Like, you done it now, buddy. You done it now. And I felt a little bit, I don't know. I was like, yeah, screw it. He deserves it. That was a dumbass move, And she just kind of was chewing him out, right? She was chewing him a new one, or ripping him a new one. I thought it was pretty funny. And that was that, I got my new bike. Now, I think they got revenge on me. I think they, like, followed me. Like, they didn't let it go, Like, he was kind of like that kind of dude to hold a grudge, And there's people like that in the world, He was like the kind of guy who would hose grit. Maybe he was that guy, I don't know for sure. But later on, like, I would bike to a grocery market, and I'd lock my bike up outside, and when I came out, it was gone. Right? The lock had been busted off it. There was the lock on the ground. Somebody stole my bike. I was like, probably that dude, with his gripe that he had to buy me a new bike. But luckily, it was near the end of my stay in Fuzhou, and I didn't, I just let it go. So anyway, that's the story here. That's the big story of Dead in the Water. I got a lot of other stories. I even have more stories from that first year. Like I said, it was a pretty exciting year. When people ask me, like, what my favorite year was, I tend to say that was, or that area. Just because it had that country feel to it. I actually felt it felt a lot, very similar to my childhood in certain ways. Just like certain, that when I grew up in the country, like, there was all these brutal things going on around me. I remember growing up, there was suicides, and one guy shot his wife and burned the house, got in a shootout with the police. It was all out in the country, and there's hunting. You just, like, you had wild dogs running around. They would kill your pets or something like that. It was the countryside to me. And so I grew up in that, and I kind of understood. I gained respect for the brutality of this world. I kind of gained a respect for it in certain ways. Well, anyway, that's my story for today. Thanks for having me on, Zahn. I hope I get a chance to be on your show again. Really, like I said, big fan. And thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Won't you join us next time on the wonderful world of the expats? I'm Zahn Scruggs. Good night.